So this morning, my talk title is The Gift. And I want to tell you how I came to it. So I told a couple of people before, like this time of year, birthdays in our family are really bunched up. One of my sons and mine. And last week was my daughter's birthday, November 12th. And this week is Becky's birthday, the 20th. And so the week before my daughter's birthday, I texted her and I said, so what would you like for your birthday? And she texted me back an Amazon gift card or a trip to Italy. So I texted her back, start packing. And then when I thought about it, I said to Becky, I've got this great idea for a gift for her. And so Becky and I got on the computer, and my daughter lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, and we looked up all the Italian restaurants in Fort Collins and looked at reviews, and we finally came to one that had really good food reviews, and it looked like a really romantic place. And I said to Beck, if we send this, Meredith and her husband could go out for a nice romantic dinner. So we did it, and she texted me back, Dad, that is the perfect gift. And in fact, last night she texted me, we're on our way to dinner. So I'll hear today how it went. But the reason I share it, it got me thinking about a gift that my daughter got me years, it must be 20 or more years ago, when Becky and I lived in Southern California. And so we came home from church one day, and it was for Father's Day. And Becky said, here's Meredith's present that she mailed you. And I opened it up, and it was a book. And the title of the book was A Father's Legacy to His Daughter. And when I opened it up, it was like a diary. All the pages were blank, but on each page there was a question. And the idea was that I would go through it and read the question and then write a response. And when I got all done, I would take the book and mail it back to her. And some of the questions were very spiritual, some were serious, and some were funny. Like, I'll give you a couple of instances. So one of them was, looking back on your life, what is the one thing you would do differently? And another one was, recall the most important lessons you have learned in your life. And another one was, tell me about your first kiss. So you can see they kind of ran the gamut. And when I first saw it, I looked at this book, it's like this thick, and I said to Becky, this is gonna take me forever to do. And I sat down, I went inside, it was Sunday after church, I went inside, I got a glass of wine, and I sat out on our patio, and I started to do it. And I found myself laughing and sobbing and writing and writing and writing. And I literally finished the entire book in one sitting. And my daughter still has it. Every once in a while, I'll tell her, how did I answer this question? And she'll say, let me go get the book. And she'll come. And so the reason I'm sharing that is that it was an opportunity for me to kind of review my entire life, you know, all of the good times, the not so good times, the bad times, and to think about how I might do things differently if I was given another opportunity. And then what I realized about it is, and it was one of the great lessons when I thought about it is, and it's not only true for me, it's true for all of us, is every day we do get a new opportunity to make the choice on starting to live our life over again. You know, we might not be able to go back, but we can all go forward. And we can consciously choose how we want to live our life, the same or how we want it differently. And we can make the choice to release what doesn't serve us, and anything that we're living in a way of doubt or fear or uncertainty, and live in a way that's filled with love and compassion and wisdom. And so I thought about it, and I began to realize that in some way that diary was a lot like my life. I come in with empty pages, and I get the choice of how I want to fill them. And that is really a gift, and we all have that. So actually yesterday, I didn't tell her I was going to talk about her today, but yesterday, I didn't bring it with me. She texted me something, and I looked at it. It was something I wrote to her when she was 3 years old. So you could see this girl is a pack rat. I have no idea why she still had it. And I looked at it, and I read it, and I thought, oh my God, and I didn't know what to say back. So I just wrote, I love you, and she wrote that back too. So I read something by a lady named Lynn Robinson this week, who is a counselor, and she asked the question, how do you know when it's time to make a change in your life? And she said, you can usually tell when you feel restless, when you feel anxious, or when you feel bored. That's usually the universe telling you it's time to make a change. And she said, and when we become uncomfortable enough, then we'll make the change. And if we don't, and we live with the pain, it'll usually wind up in some kind of crisis in our life. And when I read that, it reminded me, years ago, I worked for a consulting firm that did what's called outplacement counseling. We worked with executives who had left their job or been laid off or been terminated for whatever reason, and we taught them how to market themselves to get back into the work environment. And the head of our company used to say that if somebody is in a job that they're unhappy with for 6 months or more, and they don't make a change, they're going to get fired. And what he was saying was, if you're in a job that you really can't stand, you can't hide that for much more than 6 months, because how you behave, how you interact with people, it's going to show up in some way, and if you don't make the change, the company will make it for you. And more often than not, he was right. And so Lynn Robinson tells a story of a client that she had that had a great job. Not only was he a top person in his company, but he was known industry-wide. And he starts to see her for counseling, and he says, I hate my job. I am so bored in this job. It doesn't turn me on anymore. I hate it. And she says, well, change jobs. And he says, I make too much money. I can't change jobs. And he keeps coming back to her to get counseling, and he keeps telling her, I'm bored. And then he starts saying, I think there are people out to get me in my company, and I don't like this one, and I don't like that one. And she says to him, your intuition is telling you to make a change. She said, as a matter of fact, my intuition is telling you to make a change. And again, he says to her, I can't, I'm stuck. And so what do you think happened?
He got fired.
That's right, he got fired. He got fired, and he kind of wandered around for a year or so until he realized that he had this golden opportunity to redo his entire life any way that he wanted to do it. And he did. And he wound up getting a job that paid him even more money. I think she said, I don't remember now, in 1 month he made $90,000. And then he started to do volunteer work. He worked in a prison helping prisoners learn how to deal with change. And his whole life turned around because he was willing to listen. And Mary Morrison says that courage is taking action in the face of fear. that we have to be willing to move into the unknown and to look fear in the face. I'm going to talk about that a little more in a couple of minutes. But sometimes we have to be willing to jump. What's that statement? When we come to the end of the road, we need to be able to jump and know that God will either supply a platform or we'll learn how to fly. So Eknath Iswaran was a disciple of Gandhi, and he grew up in India, and in all his books he credits his grandmother from being his first teacher. And in one of his books he tells that they used to walk by these fields all the time, and he would see discarded snake skins all the time. And I thought that's better than seeing the snakes probably. Anyway, one time he asked her, "Why are there all of these snake skins?" And she said to him, "Because if the snakes don't discard their skins, they can't grow. And if they would continue to live in their old skins, they would suffocate." And he said years later, when he grew up, he realized she wasn't only talking to him about snakes. She was talking to him about life and how we all need to grow. And in order to do that, we need to let go of what doesn't serve us anymore and take on new ideas. And one of the things that Ernest Holmes said was that we needed to remain open at the top. And what he meant by being open at the top, he obviously knew he was going to die sometime, and he knew that there were going to be new inventions, and there were going to be new findings in science, and the world was going to change. And he said we need to be open at the top to be willing to change with the world, or else the world is going to move right by us. We need to ask ourselves, what is my self-image of who I am, and what is my purpose for living? So Mary Morrison, who I just talked about, related a story about one of her congregants who came to her for counseling. And this woman regretted that she didn't have as much education as she would have hoped. And she said to Mary, she said, I really want to go back to school, but I'm too old. I'm 42. She said, so if I go back to school, I'll be 46 when I get out of school. And Mary said to her, how old will you be in 4 years if you don't go back to school? And I was telling Becky that I read this, and she said, oh my God, that's what happened to you. And when I made the decision to become a minister, and I've told you how that story before, the very next day after I told this minister I was going to do it, I went back to him and I said, I changed my mind. And he said, how come you changed your mind? And I said, well, I'm not even a practitioner yet. It's going to take me a couple of years to become a practitioner, and then 4 years in ministerial school. I'll be way too old. And he said the same thing to me. Well, how old will you be in 6 years if you don't go? And Mary said she turned to this person and she said, it's not the question of how old you'll be. The question is, where do you want to be in your life in 4 years? Where do you want to be in your life in 4 years? What is your dream for your life? So Mary said, I love this, she said, if you're breathing, God still has plans for you. If you're breathing, God still has plans for you. And she told another story, a quickie, about a woman who graduated medical school at 72 years old, and she graduated medical school. And the story behind it is, for most of her life, she was a nun. And in her order, you had to retire at 62. And she said, I knew God wasn't through with me at 62 or 65, and I knew I could do more. And I had always thought about being a doctor, so she went back to medical school and got her MD degree at 72 years old. You know, we talk about co-creation, and what co-creation means simply is partnering with God to create the life that we would like to live. And Gary Zukav wrote, choice is the engine of our evolution. If you choose unconsciously, you'll evolve unconsciously. If you choose consciously, you'll evolve consciously. So that's, you know, that's our gift, the ability to make choices and to decide what we want to have in our life and where we want to go. So Erwin Kula is a rabbi, and I said I was going to talk about this a little later, but he said, he talks about living in mystery, and I love this. He said, living with mystery means dancing with uncertainty. Dancing with uncertainty. That doubt is a prerequisite for any meaningful journey. Doubt is a prerequisite for any meaningful journey. And we all have permission to act without knowing. And so if you think about that, what would life be like if we knew how everything was going to turn out? You know, what kind of decisions would we make? And yeah, I see a lot of smiles, but we would know how everything was going to turn out. We might make some decisions that you know, that would change our life. I was trying to think. There's a really sad Garth Brooks song about, I'm glad I didn't know because I would have made different choices, and it's about a romance. And I always think about, and I don't know if this is true, but it's about the other person perhaps has passed on, and he's saying, if I knew how it would end, I never would have started it. And life could maybe be a little boring too if we always knew how things were going to turn out. Part of the joy of having something turn out great is saying, I really made it. You know, I beat the odds. I faced down my fear. And Kula quotes a philosopher named Franz Rosenzweig, who says, life is a succession of leaps into pathfulness. Life is a succession of leaps into pathlessness. And so what he says, we take a path and we follow it for a while. And then we got to leap again. And there's never a final decision, and there's never a chance to end all choices. We keep moving and moving and evolving. So, Becky and I have an acquaintance who used to come here. She never came actually here, but when we were in a different location, she came, and she stopped coming. And Becky and I kind of remained friends with her, and every few months we have coffee together. And the last time we had coffee, she said to me, you want to know why I stopped coming? And I said, yeah, I really would like to know. And she said, well, you know, you talk about searching, and you talk about striving, and you talk about dreaming and living your dreams. And she said, I'm too old for that. And she said, this is true. Becky and I talked about, she said a lot of different things. Becky heard some things I didn't, but I really keyed in on this. And she said, you know, you talk about new beginnings. I'm done with that. And I was really, you know, I was really blown away. And I actually thought about it a lot, because I thought, am I not supposed to talk about things like that? You know, I mean, she was kind of saying, she actually did say, your congregation is a little old to be talking about dreaming, you know, something like that. And I thought, well, you know, I'm their age, and I think about it all the time, and so does Becky. And I thought, so what would I talk about if I didn't talk about that? 3 easy ways to die, you know, or, you know, easy ways to dig your own grave, you know? I mean, what would there be if we didn't have stuff to look forward to. I mean, you know, Grandma, I know that's really sarcastic, but Grandma Moses didn't start painting till she was 90. Think about our political scene today. 5 of the people running to be president are way up in their 70s. You know, the president right now is like, what, 73 or 74? And Biden, but you know, forget about who you like and who you don't, but Biden is in his 70s. Bernie is in his 70s. Elizabeth Warren is in her 70s.
The new guy.
Yeah, Bloomberg is in his 70s. So
Some of us are in our.
yeah. Well, none of us that I know of are running for president. But my point is, you know, these people have the energy and the wherewithal to see to run. And so why would any of us give up? It's never too late to change. Yesterday at the this fellow was younger, but yesterday at the pet blessing there was a volunteer with 2 of his children, and we got to talk, and he was telling me how last year their 2 dogs died, and they were way up. They were 18 years old. They had the dogs, he and his wife, before the kids. And so I asked him, "You ever going to get another dog?" And he said, "Well, I'm waiting for this one to go to college and this one." And he was making plans about, you know, for his life in 4 or 5 years. In fact, I said to the kids, "You realize you're getting replaced by dogs?" And they said, "Yeah, we hear that all the time." And I said to them, "Well, dogs are easier," which if you've ever had a dog or a kid, you know I'm right. Anyway, Ernest Holmes said, "Let us no longer fight the old. Let us no longer remember that we were once on the outer rim. Let us forget the past and live in the eternal present of God's happy smile. Today is good, tomorrow will be better." And think about this. Every moment is like a fork in the road. We get to choose whether we're going to go left or whether we're going to go right. And each choice creates a result. And each result creates another fork. You know, Dennis Merrick Jones who wrote that our great blessing is to be able to examine who we are and what we stand for. And that takes a lot of courage to do that, to really look at your life and say, what does my life mean? So I thought I would just talk about what we can do to make better choices. And so some of the things, the 5 things that we could do, one of them is to decide that we want to make better choices. You know, sometimes people are really comfortable and don't want to change, don't want to move out of their comfort zone. So you need to really decide, is that what I want to do? Am I willing to go through what it takes to change and do something different? And the second thing is to visualize how we might want our life to be. What do we want for our life? What do we want in our life? How do we want to express the gift of living? And the third thing is to ask ourselves, what beliefs do I have now that might be blocking me from making better choices? You know, and think about it. We all probably have those, you know, that lady that I talked about before, I'm too old. I'm not smart enough. I've never done that before. Nobody in my family has ever done that before. You know, there were all kinds of beliefs that we might have that are holding us back. And a fourth thing is to stop procrastinating. If you procrastinate, you guarantee you're not going to make any changes and you're going to stay right where you are. So what we need to do is just act. And even if it's a small step that takes us in the direction of where we want to go. You know, there's a story that Socrates was sitting at the side of the road one day and somebody came up to him and said, "How do I get to Mount Olympus?" And he responded, "Make every step that you take you in that direction." You know, so it's the same thing. If we want to go somewhere, we're not going to get there all at once, but it's one step at a time. And the last thing we can do is be open to going out on a limb. Be open to taking a chance. Be open, like Mary said, to face our fears. You know, a different choice that we make can lead to great outcomes. Our thoughts are alive and they have energy, and life is all about making the choices that we make and moving on. So I want to close. I read, I think, one sentence from this a couple of weeks ago, but it's by Joseph Campbell, and it's titled "The Power of Myth." And he wrote, "We have not even to risk the adventure alone, for the heroes of all time have gone before us. The labyrinth is thoroughly known. We have only to follow the thread of the hero path. And where we had thought to find an abomination, we shall find God. Where we had thought to slay another, we will slay ourselves. Where we had thought to travel outward, we shall come to the center of our own existence. Where we had thought to be alone, we shall be with all the world." God bless you. Thank you for being here. Have a great week.